Yo, the Toronto Arrows are done. Done. Finito. Arrivederci. And big news dropped just yesterday. All right. Pints and Scrums, shout out to them, being able to drop the early news that the Canadian MLR team, the only MLR team outside the USA, is no longer going to be in operations. And everybody's just sitting back wondering what is happening. How could this be? Now, there's been talks. There's been talks, and I don't think it's any surprise that there's been a lot of struggle that's going on with the MLR. But this one is a little less about the MLR and a little bit more about the the late owner, Bill Webb, who passed away this year in August, and what the ripple effects of his loss really stands out to be. So, if you guys don't know, the Toronto Arrows were put together by Bill Webb, a long time rugby fan, one of the wealthiest in the ownership groups, and a guy who was just absolutely dedicated to making this absolutely work. And whenever he passed away suddenly, and I don't, a lot of people said that maybe he was hiding, he was sicker than what he hid, but it seems to have been very sudden in terms of the community. There was supposed to be at least a trust to be able to protect this, rugby entity, because this is his love. His widow obviously gets the inheritance from his companies and his benefactors, but this club was supposed to be a bit of a protection. From what I'm understanding from my sources, is that Bill Webb had the Toronto Arrows were under the listing that they were about to go push some things out to investors, to be able to determine, whether they can get some buy-in to the club and, be able to continue the club outside of Bill Webb's adoration from it. This is talking about from a business standpoint. And it seems that was not the situation that ended up going through. The Arrows were in a position where we've seen them the last few years. They haven't been particularly good, but again, it seems like they had a loyal base. But this is the MLR, and if you're looking at it very potentially, again, this is just taking it from my back end sources, maybe not, but it doesn't look like this was probably a very objective investment. And there's some things that are also happening within the MLR that are occurring. We know a lot of the players unions, and the players union creation is now kicking in a little bit, and that adds another factor into what's going on with the MLR and what's happening with Bill Webb, with the Toronto Arrows. And with this team, you're talking about a team that is outside the US, in a league that's losing about $5 million per team per year, and a guy that literally was doing this as almost a pure passion project, because there's no profit in the MLR. There's no profit. It is hope, prayers, and try and put out a product that would be up. And I know if a lot of people don't realize, Bill Webb was a really major contributor to a lot of the financial and health care situations that were going on in MLR. So his loss really created a ripple effect on everything. So from as I understood, this is something that came with the investors, and investors decided this isn't a good investment anymore. And I'm going to take it that the trust that Bill Webb had, even though this was under his will, we're saying we can't, in good faith, continue to invest in this club as the way it is. So unfortunately, we're not going to be able to allow this to continue. And Toronto is out now. Toronto did put out a message to the people about what they felt was, at least an explanation for what's going on here. Let's see if we can pull this up a little bit and read it off for you guys. But it's really heartbreaking, to say the least. It's incredibly heartbreaking, because This was a team that, again, was a passion project. The Canadian team fan base was, very loyal. In all intents and purposes, incredibly loyal. And they were at least having a crowd, even though they had been moving around between here in Atlanta during the pandemic, and then obviously were having their struggles. But remember that first year where they were championship contenders, but the system note that the Arrows ended up leaving for the constituents, which essentially is all right. It is with heavy hearts we formally announce that the Arrows will not participate in the 2024 MLR season. Despite extensive efforts carrying on following the passing of Bill Webb was simply too great a challenge for the club to overcome. We are working with the league office and contracted players regarding the next steps. And in the spirit of the club's co-founder, we are also working with partners regarding the Arrows Academy and the continued development of Canadian rugby talent. To our fans, friends, partners, and broader rugby community, thank you for your support over the years as it relates to ticket refunds and other such matters. We will provide further updates and details in the next coming weeks. So you're talking about a situation where it's just very, very, very difficult to be able to put in. Now, what does this mean in terms of all of MLR? Well, we know for one thing, with the divisions that was provided to us a couple weeks ago, now we're back to even 12-team divisions and 12-team league with 4 teams per division. Now that the Toronto Arrows are out, thank God that Miami Sharks are in, so that there's at least still some evenness in this. Because dropping to 11 is a lot. It's a lot, but it does have to speak a lot to the solvency of the MLR right now, and really rugby in general, because we're seeing this same effect that's going on with MLR occurring with with Premiership Rugby, and we kind of keep top 14 and Japan League out of it, but the model that's overall going for rugby around the world, especially professional rugby, is so precarious right now, incredibly precarious. So, this we're losing now for USA, for the MLR. We've lost Colorado Raptors as they exited. They didn't fold, but they exited. Now we have Toronto Arrows, and of course, we know about the infamous exit of Austin and Austin and Los Angeles Giltinis and Gilgronis, respectively. Oh, thank God for the loss of those names. Now, we know LA's got their team back anyways, and we'll find out an actual, title for them. But it's still the constriction and growth that's going on within the MLR it's a little bit scary, to say the least. It's a little bit scary because it's not it's not a profitable league right now. There's also been, because we're talking about things that are going on in the internet's world, that this is part of the process of growing a league, and to some extent it's true and it's not true. I remember it was on one of the threads we talk about rugby. There was a conversation about the NFL and how there's been growth and development when it comes to that. For example, the Indianapolis Colts in the NFL used to be the Baltimore Colts before they moved. The Baltimore Ravens used to be the Cleveland Browns before Paul Brown moved them over to Baltimore in the secret of the night. And then ultimately a new Cleveland team got brought back in 1999. The development of the Cincinnati Bengals back in the 70s, the precarious situation that the Green Bay Packers had over time. So we know these happen in sports. Even in NBA, the Utah Jazz used to be the New Orleans Jazz before they moved up, and then the Charlotte Hornets moved down to New Orleans back in 2000, and then we got the Charlotte team. And so you have these constrictions and expansions. So that is true within professional sports. The unfortunate side is typically if you have the capabilities to be able to pay for that. And I think a little bit, even though the buying power is a lot less now, I do think that the cost for having a professional team uh, 20, 30, 40, 50 years ago was significantly less than it is now. And the expectations of what you would have from a professional team are a lot less. So, and even the culture with it is so much different. So, entering into the professional space is big. Entering to professional space and an expectation of a loss is also expected. Going in with a loss that is monumentally increasing each year, and now you have a necessary but also very unfortunate situation where you have a players union that can be created that would set specific salary cap and trading requirements that might not be capable for a league that's at this point because it simply does not have the investment cycles that it requires. So, you know, I remember talking with my boy. Hey, shout out to Mick Feely. Got some check him out on a couple of our podcasts. But you know, we were talking about this in terms of what's going on even with Premiership Rugby, where you have this expectation that if you provide a product and you continue to build to try and attempt to get your typical TV distribution deals, if you don't have the mass audience to be able to solve that or to be able to purchase out the properties or products that are needed to be able to cover the cost needed to be paid for a league, it makes it entirely difficult to be receive the money and the value that you actually are expecting. Like that's really just it. Like it's a money and value situation right now. So this is not me advocating against a players union, and this is not me saying that the owners are at are in their own problem of creation. Like again, we're talking about the expectations versus the realities. But the thing is, this league and rugby right now, the models are not quite working out. And it's why we're starting to see so many competitions suddenly pop out because there needs to be more product in terms of competition. But the question goes, are we creating enough of a spectator base underneath it? Do you think that we have enough from the youth rugby side? There's, you know, we've seen the presented numbers 1.5 million, 800,000. There's essentially there's probably about 400 million fans, but are those the actual numbers? Like, are we trying to cook the books a little bit because we're not doing this stuff at the ground level? We talked about before in a further past episodes, Augustin Pichot, who spoke on the lack of growth inside these markets that are having increased populations: Brazil, Nigeria, India, China. You know, we tap into Japan, but honestly, even Japan's population isn't fully tapped in. They might have a great professional league that is now a little bit different than what it used to be in the past, but it's a lot different than what it used to be in the past, but it's not tapped into the population. Even we've seen constriction within England. So let alone the US and the potential that it has, we're also seeing constriction, especially after the pandemic, about the numbers. And the numbers are still questionable as we're growing. And so you ask, like, what are we doing to build back the grassroots population? And we're not just talking about club, even high school, you know, but we're talking about, you know, the kids level, and we're not talking about necessarily being on the field. It's creating that base across the board. So all these problems add into what is happening with Toronto Raptors, and subsequently, you know, what ends up happening with a team like the Wasps. What happened with a team like the London Irish? What happened with a team like the Worcester Warriors? What's now happening with the Toronto Arrows? And what could still happen to a number of other clubs? Because there's still a lot of things that are going on that are not quite solved yet. So all I'm saying is this is a precarious situation. It's not as simple as, well, do we have enough fans or are the stadiums even filled up? We even got to think the economics. And you know, a lot of people don't care about economics or that. They just want to be like, yo, just put out a product, you know, let me be able to see it, and then we go. But the key is like there's more to being able to put together, especially a professional sports team. And look, let's add one more element: the rise of international for World Rugby and their abilities to be able to create more money also puts a damper into how much time gets put into the professional leagues, because not only do your best players get taken out, but on top of that, you have colliding schedules. And we see this with Six Nations. We see this with the rugby championships and how it affects Super Rugby. We've seen it with top 14, even with just this Rugby World Cup. Like, there's so many collisions and a contrast that go to rugby right now in the U.S. In the world, that it's making it a very difficult business model to hold on. And I know we all want to be like, yo, we need to do this for the love of the game. We need to be able to grow because the passion. And I 100% agree. But then at the same time, you can't have some of these teams that you want to have. You can't really do some of these major moves that you want to be able to make happen. And now you got this heart pumping situation where it's just not leveraging out correctly. So let me know what you guys think on this. For me, it's devastating that the Toronto Arrows are going, especially after the guy who made them put literally his heart and soul into the creation of this thing, doing things he didn't even have to do to make this league work, to lose his club not even barely 4 months after his passing. You know, it's just I feel so I feel bad for my Canadians. And you know, I love to make fun of some Canadians. If you've been listening to this, I will make fun of some Canadians. I made fun of the Toronto Arrows a lot, but I did that out of pure rivalry, not because I want them to go. So let me know what you guys think on this one, man. Where do you think the league needs to go now as they're getting ready to present for this next 2024 year, and what needs to be held together to keep it going on? Because look, we can always say TV deals, put it on ESPN, but if you guys know, like, a lot of people don't know, sometimes you got to pay. A lot of times you pay to be on ESPN. The production costs something, or at Fox or any of these licenses. And unless there's something that's valuable that they want to pay out into, you know, it's hard to be able to say, okay, well, you know, they're going to give us a distribution deal. Like, those don't work. And even we know the TV markets are going crazy right now. We see what's happening with Disney. We look at the books when it comes to Comcast. Look at it when it comes to Paramount. Like, these things are all precarious in this streaming world. So there's ways that need to be done, but, you know, are we really ready to have that conversation? I'm going to try and bring some people on that are good for having that for the future, but just wanted you to think, let me know your guys' thoughts on it. Sad situation overall.
Anybody say I can't, I say I ain't convinced. Ride around in the city, black out the tents. Gassed up, they gon' let me, yeah. Fill up the tank.